Let's go.
And we are live. So, hello, everybody. Welcome, everybody tuning in across YouTube, LinkedIn, and also X, which is where we typically stream on a weekly basis. In this particular session, we do have a bit of different lens on how we look at go-to-market and what we're going to talk about. And this time, it's all about visualizing the workflows in go-to-market. So, if you're a go-to-market engineer, so GTM engineer or GTME, what's typically called, and you need to naturally visualize what is it that you're doing internally. Whether you are an agency, right? So you're doing that for an agency and you need to do that across multiple customers, or you have a business and internally. So like even for us, right, we have running a lot of bunch of workflows internally. And so we also sometimes just don't know what is actually happening internally. Somebody has a question, let's say in the sales team, an account exec would ask, what are we actually doing when an inbound lead does X, Y, Z? And to be honest, like we don't currently visualize, so nobody has really a clue. And that's why, it was a no-brainer to be inviting somebody like Brian, who actually works in this space and works with really cool companies like Clay, like HubSpot, to kind of dive deeper into this topic. So guys, while you're listening to me, it would be really good to find out really where you're tuning in from, which part of the world, whether you're in the US, Europe. I literally just flew in from Sicily and Berlin over the last 2 weeks. So I have a bit of time, whatever. But so quick intro on my end. So my name is Frank Saunders. I run a company called Salesforge, and we have also other forges. We do a lot of outbound stuff, specifically around email right now, and quite soon we're also going to launch LinkedIn. But yeah, we also work with a lot of go-to-market engineers that use our tech, but also need to visualize this stuff. So that's why, I had kind of a quick chat with Brian, and there's quite a good overlap in terms of who we're talking to. So so we've been doing this for a couple of years, thousands of customers, different products. About to also launch an integration with Clay, so that'll be fun. And I assume there will be a lot more overlap as well as we kind of progress. So that's it. That's a quick intro on myself. Brian, over to you. Would love to find out more about you, what you're up to, and what does your product do?
Cool. Thanks, Frank. And thanks for having me on. My name is Brian Ragone. I'm the CEO and founder of Puzzle. And I started Puzzle in 2020. But Puzzle came about because in 2017, I was running the operations for a 15-person organization. And this 15-person organization was all chaos, no order. And I was responsible for anytime we wanted to make a change to a process or a system, I would be the one who needs to go figure out how it's used and then implement that so that everyone's aligned. And I tried to do that by calling team-wide meetings. So everyone would get on the call and I would ask each person, how are we using this tool? Remind me of how this process works. And those 60-minute meetings would go on for a couple hours. And oftentimes we weren't able to make decisions. It was never clear the path forward with how we wanted to improve our processes. And it actually led to the point where I had an anxiety attack working at that company, trying to wrangle all of this order, or it was really disorder, to make the operations run smoothly. And at that point in time, I had the idea for Puzzle. I called the problem space Puzzle, which is, cross-team alignment, keeping sales operations, marketing operations, service operations, all in alignment, so that we can continuously improve over time. And since 2017, I had this idea rolling around my head. And, come 2025, we have a product on the market. We have over 1,000 companies using the software to visualize their entire GTM stack and make great decisions about what technology they use, why they use it, and be able to show anyone on the team exactly where technology is used across their processes.
Gotcha. So the focus is really on GTM, right? That's your bread and butter, right? So
that is the go-to right now. That's kind of our beachhead. And GTM, companies and GTM engineers are gravitating to this because it's really the first of its kind I've found on kind of like that tech forward operational engineer type role that organizations are starting to adopt. Where this type of work is really important, right? You're essentially structuring multiple products or stringing multiple products together to be its own living system.
Yeah. So maybe one question. So I used to work in the visualization space, actually, fun fact, prior to running Salesforge. So I totally get, the why you're doing this and who's it for and what pain does it solve, etc. But when I look at Puzzle, right, there's these other sort of, let's go, generic tools in the market like Miro or whatever, Figma, etc. Why would I, say go to market, or I'm a RevOps manager, so why would I use you or like Miro?
Great question. It really comes down to one thing. Your visual documentation should be decision grade. And what do I mean by decision grade? I mean, it should answer all of the questions that someone would have about the process to be able to come to a coherent and informed decision. Things like, how much are we spending on technology? How much does this step cost us to do manually? Is it really worth the investment to go in, and buy Clay or buy Trigify or buy any of these GTM
Yeah.
tools? And then finally, what happens after we implement that? Which roles are impacted? Who are in those roles? And how can we keep them aligned with the incremental changing that we're making to the technology? If you try to do that in Lucidchart, Miro, and Whimsical, it's going to take you hours to some of it's not even possible, but like the quantification of cost per step, or understanding where specific technology is used very easily. Those types of things will take you a very long time to get to when you're building within Miro, Whimsical, and Lucidchart. Puzzle is specifically built for making your documentation decision grade so that you can answer all those questions, keep everyone in the loop as you're iterating on your processes over time.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. So I like, so you assume I'm a dummy here. So I assume, let's say, if we use something like, Enclay and Salesforge and like Chargebee, Stripe, etc. So all these kind of different integrations, you'll be able to visualize essentially how the workflows, right? So
That's right.
cool, awesome. Just for everybody to be, I guess, on the same page, because when I bumped into Puzzle, actually it was thanks to a guy named Pavel, who's based out of Poland. So he runs the RevTech Accelerator, and he's like, "Oh, do you know Puzzle?" I was like, "No, what is Puzzle?" "Oh, they do these cool visualizations, So, and I was like, "Oh, wow, I never heard of anybody doing that in the space." So, it's just that I. I was telling you earlier, we actually don't really visualize a lot of stuff. Like the only visualizations that I can see internally in the business is actually in NA10, right? Like the workflows. So I have an NA10 guy that builds a lot of different workflows. So you can see that in there. But you're like the way I have like NA10 visualization for like everything that happens in the business, right? So from a go-to-market standpoint. So
Exactly. That one N8N workflow would really be represented by just one tile in
yeah,
Puzzle, right? So we're essentially zooming out to see the context around the automations. What
correct.
manual triggers are there? Where does N8 data pass to, so that you can see the full picture
Gotcha.
there.
Awesome. So before we're you're gonna show us the good stuff, just kind of trying to figure out. So is this something that you use like as a one-off thing just to visualize, or there's a reason for me to kind of log in frequently into Puzzle to kind of check things? I'm just trying to kind of get my hand around this.
Great question, Frank. My hot take is that process documentation should be the first thing that you do, not the last thing that you do. And
Mm-hmm.
most people think of process documentation as something that you just do after you've
Yeah.
built the thing. But in my mind, I think the documentation should lead the way, right? It is the way that you plan and understand where you're going to be adding technology to your current process. And so it is very much something that you do at the beginning and the end
Yeah.
of implementing technology. And if you're in this role, right, your job ultimately as a GTM engineer is to innovate.
Yeah.
How can I go into the sea of technology options that are out there on the market? And how can I make smart decisions about which ones I buy, where I implement it, and how I maximize the ROI on the tools that I do purchase? And that's your job. And that's the definition of innovation, right? Is
Mhm.
maximizing ROI based on technology so that you can reduce, frankly, you can reduce headcount and do more with less there.
Yeah. Makes sense. But I think the other kind of I think a frequent use case, I think, of where somebody would use Puzzle is, I think, if you're an agency, right, or you're running your own shop essentially, and you're selling your go-to-market services as a GTM engineer, and you want to visualize
Mm.
what is it that you can do for the customers, right? Is that a frequent use case of Puzzle as well?
It is. It's the
Yeah,
top use case.
the top use.
We have
Okay.
we have a lot of agencies in GTM who use Puzzle to get buy-in, and they're
Yeah,
getting buy-in from clients at specific parts of their workflow, which is the sales proposal. For instance, Clay's sales team uses Puzzle, right?
Mm,
Puzzle diagrams are their sales asset. It allows them to, when they're speaking with the customer, understand their other systems in their GTM architecture and show them where Clay can fit in. And so it gets them the initial buy-in. And then once they get the initial buy-in, now your job is to broaden that and expand the usage of technology. So I think that all technology companies could use this as a sales tool. But if you're an agency, it's a sales tool. It's a project scoping tool to
yeah.
show people exactly where you're going to be building. It helps reduce scope creep as well, because a
Mhm.
lot of clients will say, well, can we do this as well? Can we do this as well? And I use
Yeah.
it as what I call a process requirements document, right? It's a PRD. It's the operational PRD, process
Mhm.
requirements document. And so it keeps things in scope with what you're building and what you're implementing.
Yeah.
And, it helps you kind of communicate with your client in that way.
Makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So that all makes sense. Specifically, I guess when you're like in a high tech environment, right? Enterprise sales doesn't matter agency or not. Like, but ultimately, when you're trying to implement systems, you need to kind of show what's going to happen, right? So ultimately, and like you mentioned, this particular step, implementation of that could maybe the impact of that potentially reducing of headcount of X, that
Exactly.
like that is quite powerful. And so kind of complex deals, it is definitely like a must have. I also kind of so naturally I have not used Puzzle to sell, right? So but what really comes to mind, like if I would like do this, like I would use it also alongside some other tools, maybe like digital sales rooms, that comes to mind to me. Those are being used quite in the market, right? So and you would be, yeah, to me, like the way I would look at like as a core asset. So do you see like Puzzle to be just generally used with other tools quite frequently? What would be the most frequent tools
Well,
where you would be either within the tool or like in tandem?
yeah. Yeah, so deal rooms is a great
Yeah,
example, right? Because all of the diagrams that you build in Puzzle, you
yeah,
can very easily share. You can create a
yeah,
public shareable link. You can tell the system which sections of the map you want to include on that, and then you
yeah,
can link that as a hyperlink within your deal room, right? So you'll have all of your information, and you just pop out to see the operational implementation plan for a given, deal that
yeah.
you're trying to close. Um, in terms of like integrations with other tools, I mean, we have integrations with HubSpot, we have integrations with Zapier, we have integrations with Make. Those are systems that a lot of GTM engineers are trying to kind of orchestrate
Gotcha.
and build automations for. And
Mhm.
so those integrations help you reconcile what exists inside of something like HubSpot and what exists in your documentation. And it's the
Yeah,
only tool that really helps you see what's in the system, what's in your documentation. Oh, we're missing 3 workflows. Let me add that to my docs.
yeah, gotcha. All right, that all makes sense. So, ladies and gents, so everybody who's listening in, we're gonna go over to the demo part. So, if you have any questions for Brian, please do ask them right now. What we're gonna do is we're gonna take all the questions at the end, and naturally, as Brian will progress through his various bits, feel free to pop those into the comment section, whether you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and then we're gonna take those at the end. So, Brian, over to you. Let's have a look how your software looks like.
All right, let's do it. Share my screen.
Hmm.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yeah, there's a lot
Awesome.
of stuff in there.
There's a lot of steps. So what you're looking at here is actually Puzzle's puzzle workspace.
Mm,
Now, this is every process that makes up Puzzle's revenue operations. And you can see at the bottom here, I have all of my departments built out as tabs, which means I can flip over to my outbound processes, my inbound processes, and back over to my revenue
mm,
operations. And so you
yeah.
can get this really high level understanding of how your processes interrelate. But actually, today, I don't want to start at the workflow canvas. I'll get back to the workflow canvas. I want to
Mm,
start with the tool canvas,
yeah.
because the tool canvas is really the first step of when you're starting to talk about what solutions you even have interest in. And one of the big pain points that I think GTM engineers have is, what are all of the sea of options that I have on the tech market? What tools am I looking at for go to market? And you can see I have uh, in the tool canvas, I have a group of tools called GTM. And
Mm,
all of these tools are the tools that I use to go to market. And you can
mm,
see each one of them has a price within it,
yeah.
right? Lemlist, Condo, Webflow, all of these. Clay should have a price in it. And you
Mm,
get this really nice roll up of the annual cost and monthly cost of what you're spending on your tech tools. So at the beginning of this webinar, I kind of said, like, well, the first step is to how much are we spending on GTM tools? Where are
yeah.
these GTM tools used, right? And getting an understanding of the current state of what happens within your GTM operations is really the first step. And so we have a directory of over 3,000 tools, and you can type in literally almost any tool in here, and it will
Salesforce?
Salesforce.
Let's see. No, and
No, no.
no, not there yet. Damn it. It's all right. It's a quick fix.
Well, the thing
There's
is
so many tools.
you can actually add your tool here, right?
Mm,
So if I went and got the SalesForge, let me go.
salesforge.ai. Yeah. I always put people on the spot, so so it doesn't look like we like do we have Salesforce in there? No, it's like we gotta add it in there. Um, but yeah, there's like hundreds and hundreds of different tools, right? So I don't actually expect any library to have all the tools like typically. So but yeah, it's quite easy to add. Like so, it's like when somebody asks me, Frank, do you have an integration with this time this tool? I was like, no, we don't have that, but we can add it. Like we have to actually integrate. Whereas in your case, you have to just add the add it there, yeah, in the tooling section. So yeah, cool.
Exactly. And now that tool is actually available for our whole community to add
Yeah.
to their independent tool
Mhm.
canvases.
Nice, nice.
And so
So,
Mhm.
so can you just add just like any different tools, whatever the user? So if the user doesn't have their own tool, they can just add it themselves, or they have to ask you to add it.
No, they can add it themselves.
Okay, cool, awesome.
Yep, they can add it themselves. It's a user generated tool directory.
Cool, awesome.
Yep. So the idea here is that let's say that we were looking at a couple of tools here, and let's move this over here. And let's say this is our new GTM stack, or maybe like our H1 additions to
Yeah.
GTM. And we were looking at Trigify. We were looking at maybe going with Octave. We could
Mm-hmm.
switch this to Considering.
Mm-hmm.
And we're looking at, Channeled to connect uh, our Slack channel to the intercom inbox, right?
Yeah.
And if I have this, right, let's just assume that this is $250 per month. I can come here very easily and show my boss, hey, look at the technology that we're trying to implement right here. This is how much it'll cost us.
Yeah.
Oh, it only calculates active. So let me actually mark these as active here. And you can get a gauge for the investment that you would need to make in order to use these tools. But here's the real superpower of Puzzle is if I click on any one of these steps, you get a list of all of these steps. The tool card. You'll get a list of all of the steps in the workflow canvas that this technology is used. And
Mm.
so before you even buy this technology, you can go into the workflow canvas and map out how Octave will be used within your GTM stack.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go purchase the software. So instead of purchasing the software and then trying to figure out how you're going to use it and how it's best used across multiple processes, you're gonna be able to plan this out in a really nice way. And I can
Mm.
click over to the part of the map, and it can be brought to Octave's archive right now. Let me go to some Clay flows here.
Here's a question for you, because sometimes when you run a company, right? So and you have a let's say a gap within a particular workflow, like, and you're trying to figure out what's the best, let's call it, tool to plug that gap. Like, do you have some functionality there?
You mean on weighing options?
Yeah, let's say I don't know, I need to do XYZ thing, right, to make really the machine kind of run, but I don't know which tool should really do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
You do something like that, or not really? Like it would recommend, you could recommend you like, there's like 1, 2, 3 tools to plug that, or not really.
Yeah, right now we don't have that functionality, the advisory side of
So
it.
then it's a good feature request.
It's a great
That's
feature
how I think
request.
in my head, right? So I have like I'm also trying, to visualize. So this is my current engine, let's call it that, right? So I can see, and I was like, oh, I would love to do this bit, right? So I could build it out, and then it becomes a question. Oh, but who could actually, who could I plug in there, right? So,
Yes,
um,
yes.
so that's what
Uh,
I'm asking. So, yeah.
Sure, sure. Well, I'll actually show you a use case here. So, recently I've implemented this sequence right here
Yep.
where when someone visits or when someone submits or sorry, visits the pricing page,
Yep.
I have a Zapier that will enroll the contact into a Clay outbound email campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see these steps are in orange, and they're in orange because they all share one quality. They have the status of draft, right? So these orange steps here are tentative, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
not live yet. And I've
Yep.
put these 3 steps as steps that I know I want to build with Clay, but I just
Mm-hmm.
haven't gotten to yet. And
Gotcha.
I make these orange by using the conditional coloring rule,
Mm-hmm.
where unlike in Lucidchart, Miro, or Whimsical, you have to like go create your own coloring methodology and make sure that you change certain steps that are certain colors when they involve certain roles. Um, in Puzzle, you can just create a conditional rule. And you can see I have a bunch of conditional rules here. I have a manual step rule where if I toggle this on, it'll show me all of these steps in the workflow where it's manual as opposed to automated or done by an AI agent.
Yeah.
I have AI steps. I'll turn this off. Um, I have AI steps where you can see where I'm using AI and where these steps are done by an AI agent. And so it really gives you X-ray vision into your business operations. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the use case that you mentioned, which was, well, do I use Clay or do I use,
Yep.
an alternative? You can actually add multiple tools to this
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
step here. So if you're going back and forth between doing this natively in a HubSpot workflow, sequence, or doing this through Lemlist or enriching through Clay, you can
Yeah.
come in here and switch the logo very easily and put
Mm-hmm.
some build notes, right? I have some build notes in this sidebar where I kind of explain how I'm going to go about the build, but you could
Mm-hmm.
also say, considering options, HubSpot, Clay, and
Yeah.
Lemlist.
Exactly.
And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
this sidebar is another big differentiator uh, between Lucidchart, Miro, and Puzzle. Is you get to add the context around decisions, why you built it. You can embed Loom trainings within this sidebar so that you give your entire GTM team or sales team an understanding of why this step exists, what
Yeah.
it does, and why it does it.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, Makes sense. So one question that pops to mind immediately when I look at this, right? So it immediately reminds me, at like also N8N, right? Because we use that a lot, right? And
Yes.
people use make.com. So how should I guess, because you can also make some notes, I think, in make and in N8N, right? What does this workflow mean? So how
Yeah.
should I look at these sort of two things when I think about N8N, maybe or make, and then I think about puzzle?
Yeah. So Puzzle's the zoomed out version of N8N in Make
Mhm.
but
Yeah, yeah, well, yeah. Mhm.
in Zapier. So for each one of these steps here, if I'll go up to my flow up here, for instance, you can see I have a bunch of Zapier automations that are running here,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
they're actually synced to the Zapier system, right? So
Mm.
if I click this button, it brings me directly to a pop out of
Yeah.
the inner workings of this particular Zap. And so
Mhm.
within Puzzle, you should think of each step as a workflow, right?
Mhm.
A collection of steps that happen to get some job done. And the broader thing, the section, should be thought of the full process, right? And the difference between a process and a workflow, in my mind, is that a workflow gets some job done. A
Yep.
process produces an outcome. And by outcome, I mean closes a deal, moves a customer from one stage to the next stage, whether that's, demo scheduled to contract signed. What are all of the things that need to happen? Who are all of the people who need to be updated? What systems are being used to be able to orchestrate that entire outcome?
Mhm.
And so that's the difference between something like N8N and using Puzzle. Is it's a zoomed out version where
Mhm.
your N8N will be one step and Puzzle will be the broader picture.
Yeah, I can also see a video on the right hand side as well, right? That explains, probably why this
Exactly
step
right.
is like that. So,
Yep.
uh, okay, so like in my case, let's say, let's think from a kind of company standpoint. So, we have a sales team, we have a customer success team, and a marketing team. So I think from a marketing standpoint, it kind of makes like, so do I assume correctly that anybody can log in and just can see the various different tabs and how things are running, right? So that's how
Yes,
a typical company would, different teams would just use it and just view the flows, right? So um
exactly. Yeah, you can invite people to the people
people as well.
canvas. The people
Okay.
canvas is where you see all of the people who are within the organization.
Mm,
And or instead of inviting them to the actual system, you
yeah,
can use your public shareable views, which is a more customizable way of picking specific sections.
yeah,
And so you can see that this is the entire RevOps tab, but there's
yeah.
only 4 or 5, 4 sections that are actually shown here. And your
Mhm.
team member can actually come here and select the role that they're associated with. So I'm going to select
Mm,
sales rep, for instance,
yeah,
and that will show them very easily what steps their role is assigned to. And they can
mm,
click on it. They can still watch the videos. They can
yeah,
still see all of the context and information. The only difference is they can't edit it. It's view
yeah.
only.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, because I have some sales reps that always keep on asking me questions about, oh, what happens, if this happens, and where do I get involved, and what about the SDRs? The account exec, oh, where do the SDRs play? Is this the SDR territory? What happens if this happens? So you get that quite a bit, and sure, we could kind of write it up, but really you want to visualize, if this happens, that's why it's so important, because there's multiple scenarios. What are the outcomes with leads, and stuff like that. So.
Right.
Um, all right, makes sense. There's a quick question that I just want to quickly pick from Zofia. So, can we also add our own develop app?
Yes, you can add your own app. You would do it the same way that you would add Salesforge, right? You would come here to the search tools. You could just name it whatever you want, create a new tool, put the app name. And as long as you have an image link that's online, you would have to you would have to find that link and post it here to have your icon accessible to our system.
Sometimes for some people it's so difficult to find that link, but it's actually quite easy. Like just that some people do it for the first time. They're like, "What? A link to the image?" But yeah, it's quite easy actually. Once you've done it once. Excellent. So as Brian is showing us all the good stuff, guys, if you got any question for Brian, right? So this session, guys, is really for you. Like if you have a specific question, how to look at this from either GTM engineering standpoint, maybe RevOps, or you have questions about specific kind of category of tools, whether that's CRM, outbound tools, you name it, let us know. But what are the maybe while folks are asking this question, what are the typical questions that Brian that people then would ask you when you show this? What is triggering people? Like what sort of questions they would ask you typically about puzzle?
Well, people have a lot of interest in the cost calculator, which I've yet to show you. Let me go show you what the cost calculator looks like,
Mhm.
especially in the context of GTM workflows.
Mm,
Um, I have a couple of pre-built before and after flows here, and this
mhm,
use case is especially good for agencies
mhm.
because if you have things that you're consistently implementing into your clients' operations, right? These are playbooks that you probably rinse and repeat. And you want an easy way to show your clients how much time they're going to be saving with this specific recipe. You
Yeah.
can look at the cost calculator. So the step cost calculator exists on the step.
Mhm.
So let me just kind of frame the conversation here. At the top here, I have this manual process. And this manual LinkedIn prospecting process is such that a lead will mention your company on LinkedIn. You'll monitor the company page for mentions.
Mhm.
The sales representative will review the post, kind of
Yeah.
extract information. They'll have to go and research the contact's core information, research the company's core information, put it in the CRM. That's the clunky manual version of prospecting. And if I'm having a conversation with someone who does this, I'm going to show them this view right here.
Mhm.
I'm going to show them that each one of these steps is costing them hundreds of dollars per month, under the assumption that this is done 50 times per month. But maybe this is done 100. Maybe it's done
Mhm.
150 times per month.
Yeah.
And so we can change these assumptions by coming into the step card and just changing the frequency, right? We'll
Yeah.
keep that 20. Let's say that this is 100. And you can see I am getting a step cost calculator that calculates on the step. But in addition to that, I get the roll up of what it costs each step and per run, monthly, and annual cost. So if
Mhm.
I'm making a pitch and I'm saying, hey, you can use Clay to automate your company mentions that are going on LinkedIn, and I can actually bring this cost to zero, I'll do it for $5,000, which is less than a 6-month ROI for you. What do you think? And what if I could do that in addition to this, in addition to this, and you can keep showing them different cases
Yeah.
where you can bring their costs from something like $20,000 to something like zero in multiple use cases. That's pretty compelling to justify your consulting fee.
Yeah, the other way I look at it is like, like there's naturally multiple different setups that you could sort of, implement, including different tool stacks, right? So some of them are more expensive, some of them are less expensive. And, here's, a basic setup, but here's advanced setup, right? You could even like, two
Yes.
different setups, right? So that's how we think about our business, right? So what is the optimal tool stack? Well, like, we want to use the least possible like personally, we want to use the least possible number of tools, but sometimes we may want to get this other tool because it solves that other pain. But it's like, I think back in the days, kind of, when we started Salesforge, we were thinking like, should we go down the path of using HubSpot, or should we go down the path of using Salesforce or Atio, whatever the CRM is, right? And
Mhm.
and what is the combination of tools, here, and the combination of tools there? And we had to decide. Same with I guess right now. So when we look at, let's say, data enrichment as let's take another use case. So we like, okay, if we just need a bunch of email addresses that we need to pull, what if we use this one data vendor? That's one approach, right? So it's going to cost us this much, and then this is the waterfall approach, and then this is the whatever approach, right? So there's different outcomes, different costs, right? So um so that's something that kind of goes, always, I'm thinking probably on a weekly basis about things like these. But so one thing that does come to my mind, Brian, so it does take I would say a fair bit time, right, to visualize, etc. um is there like a fast way to visualize any, or like it really that somebody has to visualize all this manually, like?
Yeah, so today there's no way to get maps generated automatically. I mean, if you go into Lucidchart, Miro, or
Yeah.
Whimsical and you try to generate maps automatically, you're going to
Yeah.
get something very, very generic
Yeah.
that hardly helps you make a good, if you're trying to make your documentation decision grade, you're not using Miro's AI tool.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to be doing this manually.
Mhm.
And that brings me back to kind of, where do you invest your time when you're
Mhm.
documenting your processes? Do you want to
Yeah.
invest in your time in doing it in Miro that only gets you so far? Or are you going to do it in a system that actually helps you make that decision? And
Yeah.
so, in either system, whatever system you want to visualize your flows in,
Mhm.
it's going to take time. And it's going to take time to make it accurate. It's going to take time to make it easy to read. Well, that's true in Miro and Lucidchart, but not so much in Puzzle, because it's kind of this
Yeah.
structured database and structured view
Yeah.
of it.
And then the other thing that comes to mind is, when I just look at this stuff, like, are these flows shareable, like with an external link?
Yes. So that it brings me back to the shareable views, right? This is where you can add specific sections, and I could even post this directly into the chat, and anyone would be able to see
To
these
access it.
flows.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense, because yeah, if you're an agency, or you need to share somebody with somebody externally, right? So I'm just wondering how is that being done? Um, because you just want to, you don't want to necessarily invite them, right, as a user into the platform. So
Right.
but makes total sense. So guys, don't be shy, feel free to ask any questions that you do have to Brian. We have quite a lot of people tuning in, but today maybe it's the summertime, people don't have as many questions, but we did cover quite a good chunk, if I'm very honest. Like I think I asked the typical stuff that I think, as a, let's say, as a CEO of a company, when I'm thinking, the type of conversations I have with my RevOps team, where we also have GTM engineering function, right? What do the salespeople ask me? Customer success. So yeah, I mean, totally get with the things with the different tabs. How different orgs would run, right? So is this something that you would say we should cover, but we haven't covered yet? That is
Yeah.
very important.
Yeah, well, I think the last component to this, because we kind of covered how to effectively weigh tech options using the tool canvas.
Yeah.
I kind of showed you what it's like to show stakeholders what's possible in the
Yeah.
workflow canvas.
Hmm.
And then you're able to identify new opportunities with the ROI of
Hmm.
tech stack and process costing and weighing decisions there.
Hmm.
The last component is, instead of using Puzzle even at the beginning and the end, you can also use it as a implementation tool using this step status, right? So as you start to, I don't know, have an idea about how to add an automation on top of this particular workflow, you
Hmm.
can keep things set as the status of live
Yeah.
across this entire flow here, and keep this, I mentioned it earlier, as draft stage. And so it just keeps your team completely aligned on what parts of your process are still kind of being implemented and
Yeah.
created, and which ones are actually live. Uh,
Hmm.
so I use it as a project management tool with my team, right? So I'll go ahead and scope things out using this task tab on the step. And I'll say, we need to, define what the AI script is for this clay enrichment step. I need to meet with, X, Y, and Z. So you can essentially scope things out and keep tabs on tasks that you need to do as you're building things over time.
Hmm. Yeah, makes total sense. Yeah, that will be done there. Yeah, especially if you have some sort of quite a big implementation, right, that you're doing. Um, like something that we're thinking of is also doing, let's say, billing migration, from one system to another. And
Yeah.
that's another thing that comes to mind. How I would visualize, what are the, how we would migrate, what are the different steps that we need to do the migration, right? So it's something that you can sort of visualize. Otherwise, it would just sit in the dock, right? So, or in
Yes.
conflict, something, right? So,
Yes.
um,
And
so yeah,
Frank, there's also commenting, much like all the other tools that do visual diagramming. The
yeah,
difference is that you can comment on the step. So if I
yeah.
say, hey Brian, is the script ready for this enrichment?
Mhm.
Um, and I post this, that person will get an email, and you can actually thread your conversations, which means you can have
Nice.
multiple conversations on the same step. So if people have ideas about this part of the process, it doesn't get mixed up with
Mm.
conversation that might be more important towards implementation or a small iteration or something like that.
Nice. And do you also integrate with Slack?
We don't. If you wanted to do that, you'd have to go through Zapier.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, like the way that I would look, like we operate everything else, like I think many companies do. Like if I get like a ping on the flow, I just want to be notified in Slack. That's why kind of Slack kind of customize. When you think about Trezor, if somebody needs my attention. um so yeah, awesome. Guys, if you have any questions, do feel free to ask any final questions that we have for Brian. But Brian, typically, when it comes to kind of finding about you or asking kind of your questions about what else you can do with puzzle, etc., where's the best place to find about you, Brian,
I mean,
or
best
the
place
company?
is to go directly to our website,
Yeah,
puzzleapp.io, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And we can, book 25 minutes and I can give you a deeper dive specific to your use case.
nice. All right, guys. We don't have that many questions anymore left, so it's all. So we're gonna wrap it here. But as I said, if you wanna speak to Brian, feel free to pop over to his site, check out the product, book in a demo, He's also a bet on LinkedIn, same as myself. And thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. And we shall see you next time. Cheerio.